Welcome very, very much to Conversation. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Behrad Nakhai. He's a nuclear engineer, which is an interesting way of deciding what he is. He understands the nuclear process, and he's also a person from the country of Iran originally. And we're here to talk about atomic energy and also some of the roots of energy systems. And we're talking here with him. And Nakhai, welcome very, very much to Conversations. We got a chance to take a couple of hours now to let the people be aware of Iran and also nuclear energy and also the implications of it to the contemporary world situation. So welcome to Manhattan Neighborhood Network and to Manhattan.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Okay, that's fine. We're talking with that. So tell me, why don't we start with you, okay? You're from Iran, and you're also a nuclear, I don't know if you're a scientist, you're a nuclear engineer.
You're an engineer.
Let's talk about that. Your own background, where you were born and raised. Let's start with you and base it in your own personal history. And then we're going to talk about nuclear energy as a factor in the human condition and the implications of it. And we got 2 hours we can talk on this subject. So tell us, where were you born and raised and your background?
I was born in Tehran and raised in Tehran and came to the United States in 1966 to study nuclear engineering. I studied at the University of Tennessee and got my bachelor's degree, master's degree, and Ph.D. degree from the University of Tennessee.
In nuclear science or?
Nuclear engineering.
Nuclear engineering as opposed to philosophy or nuclear energy or nuclear engineering. It's a term that isn't always associated with it. But
nuclear engineering is associated with developing of nuclear energy as a source of energy to produce electricity, and exploring other possibility of using energy to serve. So I studied there, and for a while I taught, I developed program, then I worked at the power plants and retired in 2007 and concentrated my attention in promoting nuclear power as a safe and useful alternative to other energies and an absolute necessity for the future, and also how we can harness this energy and how we can use the nuclear power to promote peace and to promote human rights.
A very, very interesting take on things, a very important take that you have. I think it's, if we get down to it in a sense, it's one of the most important questions that's confronting the whole of humanity now, because it's the spear point of much of the thinking, geopolitically and otherwise. And the story is incredibly interesting and relevant to the contemporary moment. But I wonder if we could, you were born in Iran and you were raised there, and how could you not have pursued that in Iran, or you came to the United States on your own volition to get the education, or could you fill in a little bit of your early life's experience?
Sure, I could have gone to the University of Tehran and studied there, but at the time, in '66, many students who graduated, they would try to come for the advanced degrees in science and technology abroad in the United States and Europe to study there. And I decided to come into the United States, study, and I was determined once it's finished, I will return to Iran.
Did you speak English as a young man in your family setting, or what was the family setting, if I may?
The family setting was a very traditional family setting. I learned English at the school. The school that I attended for the first 6 years was a French school, and the for second 6 years was a Italian missionary school in which every day we have 1.5 hours of English to learn. So I had the background, the foundation of the English when I came to the United States.
Is that characteristic of education in Iran, that English is emphasized? Because English is a language that is spoken all over the world, but I just wonder.
Yeah, in every school they're teaching English, that is correct. And now with the advent of internet, it's become more prevalent and people learn more English. That is because English has become the language of communication on the internet.
Yes, exactly.
And in other language also, but by most of important information and almost 90% of the information on the internet, useful information, is in English.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. Necessary as a tool of communication.
So you understand well. Let me just say something. I asked about your early background. Was the family setting one of an intellectual bent? Were you interested in mathematics or in physics and so forth as a young man and encouraged in that? Yeah.
No, I was very interested from the beginning in mathematics and science. That was my leniency toward my tendencies in studying, and that is what I also studied. Because the way at the time that I went to school, you had 6 years of elementary school,
yes,
then 3 years of middle, and the last 3 years of high school.
That's like here too.
3 years was especially you could either use natural sciences or literature. I chose sciences.
I see. Mathematics, you had a knack for mathematics?
Mathematics, yes. It was mathematics, natural sciences, and literature. I chose mathematics.
I see. And the family setting was encouraging of you to move in that direction. Was the family setting one of intellectual curiosity and encouragement that way? Or was it, you picked it up at school, or was it something that was part of your bringing up around the dinner table?
Active family. And, we often, it's very interesting, in Iran, the end of the week is Friday.
Okay.
Usually always on Fridays. As long as I remember, we have guests from the morning coming there from various walk of life, from military, from science, from universities, from literature, and they would come there, stay for lunch till the afternoon, and it was an open house Fridays. So, and through that, we learned a lot. I don't remember ever having eaten Friday on lunch or dinner, just family together. We always had company.
You always had company, and it wasn't just chatter. It was intellectually interesting talk that would go on and encourage.
They come from all walk of life. They come and talk and discuss, and it was enjoyable. I would learn to. I would engage. I was kid, but it was enjoyable for me to learn.
Well, good. Good for you. I think that's good. I'm sorry. I'm making I'm laughing in a sense, but I would assume so, because you would have had to have had a very interest in a lot of that kind of thing to become so interested in and so knowledgeable of something of nuclear engineer. That's a very, very interesting take on the human condition, because that realm of human activity and thought is very much part of the geopolitical and the organization structure of the planet, it seems to me.
Sure.
Yeah. Were you interested in geopolitics?
Not at the time that I was studying, but after that, I became more and more interested. So for the last 25, 26, 30 years, I have been studying and looking at it, analyzing, reading, and learning, which is very interesting.
Learning is interesting, is it not?
Always.
Yeah.
You only stop learning when your pulse stops.
When you're you only start learning whether you want to or not. It's a learning experience. Yes, yeah.
No, you until your pulse stops, you can learn. There is more information that any one person can learn and master.
It is. Some people say we live in information overload. The amount of information available to... Imagine being 10,000 years ago. There wasn't very much interesting knowledge such as there is now of the whole earth itself and all the cultures and all the questions of science and technology in the universe available to you as you sat on a riverbank 2,000 years ago. There wasn't a heck of a lot to talk about except the deer just came down to drink. Or
no, but the fact is, at that time, there were challenges there. Just imagine the first wheel that they tried to build.
Yeah.
How much of ingenuity and talk and mind went into it to create the wheel.
Yeah. It was a long trail and winding up to where we are now, don't you think?
That's correct.
And what about pre-human? We've been here, the planet and everything. Were you interested in the ancient developments or the structure of the universe? There was things going on in the universe before there was an Earth. There were all kinds of things going on in this planet before there was anything like what was to become Homo sapien and so forth. And I'm wondering if you take interest in comprehensively understanding the whole question of life and processes on this planet.
I haven't gone that way, but my thought has always been that through science throughout the history, in ancient time, if you look at it, science have always been associated with ethics. The fact is that the first philosopher, Pythagoras, the first
Who?
Pythagoras.
Pythagoras, I don't know. Tell me. Pythagoras. I'm sorry, I'm ignorant. I don't know. Did he?
Well, it was the founder of philosophy.
Where?
Pythagorean theorem.
Hungarian.
No, Pythagorean theorem.
Okay, I'm not familiar. Okay, yeah.
Pythagoras was the founder of philosophy. At the time, he took the formulation to calculate the sides of triangle, got them together, and created the Pythagorean theorem.
Okay.
That was the science, and he was a philosopher. Archimedes.
Oh, well, now you're thinking Greece now.
Pythagoras was in Greek also. Interestingly,
Greek, the other word.
Greece, he fled to Iran from Greece because his life was threatened. Archimedes, the father of experimental science, is also a philosopher that developed the buoyancy law. That Pythagoras theorem, that buoyancy law, is something that today we teach it in high schools. The ethics and the moral issue that they tangled with at that time is still with us. We still are discussing it and exploring it in schools, in universities, post-studies, post-universities, and still in think tank groups.
All right, I'm interested in that. And bringing back to our Zoroastrianism, that was and those people that came down from the steppe that Mr. Machiavelli's talking about. There was the Greek culture that was developing there, and then there was a culture developing in Iran very, very early, down around Ur. Ur was a very, very ancient setting.
Yes, if you look at this history, the science today compared to the science at the time of Pythagoras or Archimedes, millions of fold more sophisticated, advanced. But the ethics and the morality almost hasn't budged.
Very interesting. Yeah.
In another word, if you want to take the ratio of advancement of ethics and morality to the ratio advancement of science as a measure of civility.
Yes, civilization itself, yeah.
We are at the most barbaric era of human existence.
We were when now?
Right now.
Right now, you think we're barbaric?
If you want to take
we degraded to that.
You have developed advanced capabilities for which we do not have corresponding ethics and morality, how to use them.
Very interesting, very interesting. From somebody who is a nuclear scientist interested in theorems and mathematics and all of that sort of thing, but it's got a grounding in ethics. And one of the troubles I can see now, we're going to become good friends in the time ahead, and one of the problems is, if I may, you're too damned interesting, because we could talk to you for about 16 hours on all sorts of subjects, but we're supposed to be talking about nuclear energy, and you are a nuclear energy engineer, and nuclear, understanding of the nuclear process was something, if I'm thinking, it's relatively recent. Did we understand that there was a nuclear reaction and that there was the nuclear force was something that was part of the human condition? And you apparently are interested in that, and maybe we could get around to when did we come to understand the nuclear energy in real scientifically in significant terms with which we address it today? When and where did we first become aware of it out of history?
In late 19th centuries and early 20th centuries, that is where the nuclear fission was developed in those areas. And they realized that, see, if you burn one atom of carbon, you generate 4 electron volt of energy.
Okay.
When you fission one atom of uranium, you generate 200 million electron volt of energy.
That's a lot more.
That is quite a bit more.
That is a massive change.
That is massive change. And the idea is that could that be used in those areas which was during the war, Second World War.
Well, now we've come all the way up to the present. Yes, all right.
The focus was that how we can use this energy, harness this energy for bomb. And that is where nuclear bomb was developed.
Who first brought up the idea that there's something existing as nuclear energy in the historical term?
Well, the fact is that
when became to be its importance in its modern manifestation. Yeah, Einstein was very early, and some of the early physicists.
No, and so you see, Martin King Klaproth discovered uranium.
Yes.
And he was a German chemist, and he called it after the planet Uranus.
Uranium. That's what it's from. Uranium. Why Uranus? I mean, it is a planet, yes, but.
Yes.
And when was that? Was that the first beginning of something where we began to understand?
That was around 1789.
Now, we've understood coal, we've understood oil, we've understood wind power, we've understood sun power, and also, but nuclear energy as a new thing in terms of the human condition is relatively recent. in terms
It's
of our
actually
knowledge base.
20th century phenomenon.
Okay, that's recent.
And it has its roots in bomb. So that is what they harnessed it for bomb. And since the laboratory that was handling that, studying that, was in an apartment in Manhattan, their development was called Manhattan Project.
I'm in Manhattan now. Which part of Manhattan was that discovered?
I think it was in Upper West Side. I'm not sure.
Upper West Side. Well, we're talking to you from Upper West Side. Manhattan Neighborhood Network is about the center of Upper West Side. That's where we're talking to you from.
Yeah.
And who were the people who were involved? Who were the early pioneers who came to make this that had been unknown, known to the world, either in actual terms? Was it part of the periodic tables? Where did it fit into the other experiences?
When Klaproth found this uranium that filled into the periodic table, they figured out that that can be fissioned and produced. It wasn't later they see that you see that many scientists went through a studying of radiation that becomes too tedious to go through.
Yeah, okay,
but it was through the Pierre and Marie Curie.
Yeah, Madame Curie, French, yeah. Those French.
The X-ray, yes. And given they see that this atom is decaying, and they call that decaying radioactive.
Right, right.
So, from this time, they looked at it, the feasibility of this being harnessed. They saw the feasibility. Einstein was asked, and he wrote back that he sees the possibility and feasibility for this to be used. And the nuclear weapon was developed. It was headed by Army General Leslie Groves.
I don't know him. Was that getting down to the event in Chicago and the under
No,
the
no, no,
football
no. Leslie
field?
Groves, because he was he
in the 20s or what?
In just that mid-40s. It was
mid-40s, yeah.
Yes, they assigned him as the top man for this, and he hired type scientists to develop this energy.
They were looking for a weapon capability that this force, if it existed, was of significance. When Roosevelt
died, they had to brief Truman because Truman had no idea such a project exists or there is a nuclear atomic program going on.
Very few people of the population of the world would have any idea of what the hell you were talking about if you brought that item up, right? And that's just yesterday in terms of the human adventure.
President Roosevelt knew it, but Truman, as his vice president, had no clue what is going on. And when he became president, then they have to crash course him to learn about the development of nuclear, and he had to make quick decisions about it.
Right.
There are many different books written about this. A book few years ago I saw it written that it was General Groves that was behind this development, and by all account, he was the man. If they wanted something that big to succeed, he was the man to be put in charge
of that. And that was in the context of what was to become the Second World War and a fight against fascism and so forth. That was the first time that this incredible force was available. Prior to that, we knew about sunlight. We knew about
that was
fire.
We have no idea that this type of force exists.
Right.
Of course, now we know that at the center of Earth, this fission continuously goes on and generates energy in the center of Earth.
And it has something to do with the sun
no
as
idea,
well. Yeah.
knowledge of that.
Mm-hmm.
So this nuclear came from there, but then they realized that if this can have this great force, if somehow we can harness that energy, then we can use it for peaceful purposes, for civilian use. And that is why they started to look at the building a reactor, and they saw that as a good source of producing energy. Now, what is a nuclear reactor? A nuclear reactor is practically a boiler.
A boiler.
Somehow generate heat, that generate boils water, and that water turns into steam. Steam goes into turbine to turn the turbine, produce energy.
Well, we had that earlier. We had the turbine edge. We had that sort of thing earlier.
Yes,
we didn't know the nuclear.
To boil that water to produce
steam power. Steam engine, that was a big invention.
You can use coal, you can use gas, you can use oil, you can use garbage, or you can use nuclear fuel. So the idea of the nuclear fuel is just to generate heat for you. And at the very beginning, that the thought was that how we could go forward with this. There were different ideas, whether we should use pressurized water, whether we use light water, whether we use heavy water, whether we use molten salt reactor, whether we use liquid metal reactors. All of these are different means of removing that heat. The history says that the director of Oak Ridge National Laboratory was Alvin Weinberg, one of the team of Manhattan Project. He preferred molten salt reactor. The head of commissioner of nuclear of AEC, at that time it was Atomic Energy Commission, was Robert Shaw, and there was a bit of animosity between these two individuals, so he opted for a liquid water reactor.
Now, wait a minute, let me pause. Is this still at wartime, Second World War?
No, this is after war.
The World War II was ended with an atomic blast.
No,
so we had been able to discover its war power making capability by the end of the Second World War of 1945.
There is a dispute that whether it was those bombs that end the war, because that was written a few years ago, a research book. They said that Japanese had given signal to United States that they are willing for unconditional surrender in May of that year.
Yes, well, that's bringing it down to a certain month of a certain year.
Only request was because they have a high respect for their emperor, not to demean the emperor, not to insult him. United States did not accept that. That condition. He said, no, we don't accept that condition. However, after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they did accept that condition, and they did not demean and insult the emperor. In other words, both of those bombing could have been prevented had the United States accepted the full unconditional surrender of Japanese in May. The thought was that General Grove wanted to have his bomb, his project to the end. He didn't want it to stop there. And he forced the hand of Truman not to accept it, to go to the end. But that most probably becomes a point of contention till more research and more knowledge comes through. But the fact is, it's something that's happened. It was unfortunate, but what we have to do now is to see that and have the wisdom to learn from that and try not to happen in that form or any other form.
Okay, now one thing, if I pause for a moment, how long has it been since we've known about the power of fire? We've known about power of fire to change our environmental condition and other kinds of sources of energy that have importance. We've known about the sun giving birth to agriculture and so forth. We've had that. But the atomic power, and then we haven't quite gotten yet now to the thermonuclear problem of fusion and to the super weapons of the hydrogen era, all of which happened just the last second of human existence on this planet. And it's a main new source of energy that has to be well understood by everyone in a way perhaps of something really very, very new and very, very crucial for the development and future development of human society. No?
Yeah, we have to learn it, and more importantly is we have to use it wisely. We have to see that today, I remember, and most probably you do too, in your childhood.
Yeah,
You didn't have continuous electricity, and very houses had the kerosene lamp in case they had candles, and sometimes the energy would go and you would continue your life with your candle and kerosene with not that big of a difference.
Thousands of years and so forth. So there's been a big, what I'm trying to say is there's a qualitative new change in the human dynamics that has come into the modern experience through the energy that becomes available to the human society. It's not something like another 100 years of slow development that is the history of the world up until just our time. I wonder if we're adequately aware of the significance of that transformation of the moment in which we find ourselves. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yes, we have to see that we have this opportunity and it came at the right moment. See, according to the reports, World Bank reports and UN reports, 1850, on 1850, the world had a population of 1 billion.
Okay.
By 1950, the population grew to 2 billion.
Yes.
1962, it was 3 billion.
Yeah, exponential, yeah.
In another word, it took 100 years to go 1 billion. It took only 12 years to go another billion. And today we are close to 8 billion.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But at the same rate that we are here, at 50 years ago, when it was 2 billion, we didn't have that much use for energy. We had it for convenience. It was mostly a luxury.
Yeah.
Today it had become a necessity. You cannot go to a hospital without electricity. You cannot fix your breakfast or eat your food without electricity. You cannot even enter your house without electricity. So electricity has become a fundamental necessity of life.
Yes.
And for the quality of life, that is the first thing that you need. So we have to generate enough of energy, safe and plentiful, to help develop that need.
And one source of safe energy that could be made available to the world society, outside of the coal and the oil and so forth that we've been doing in the past, or wind energy to drive a sailing ship across the ocean. One of them is the nuclear energy, which is newly available to us, and yet we still tend to see it as something that's very, very dangerous and associated with death and destruction and so forth. And we ought to have a new look at that as a world society, I would suggest, and I suspect you do as well.
Yeah. The fact is that there is no single source of energy that can respond to energy need of today. You need a combination of these, but the most important part of it, you must be very cognizant about the environment that you generate this energy.
Sir, yes, sir.
You want to generate energy for survival. If it creates pollution that kills us, that would be a counter move.
That would be indeed. In fact, if I may interject, there are studies, and particularly the thermonuclear. The hydrogen, the atomic bomb was one thing. The hydrogen is another order of magnitude. And there are studies that measure the collective capability of the Homo sapiens species, one nation against the other, with their weapon systems, have become, if they were to be unleashed, species lethal. Do you think that is the case? That if there was an all-out exchange of weapons, as there has been the want of Homo sapiens to judge in the heat of war and the existential challenge of a wartime situation, they were to be all unleashed, it could mean the end of our species. Do you think that's over talk, or is that nonsense, or is there some truth to the fact of how
that we have to refer that to an expert in that area? I don't have much knowledge in that area. But what I can say here is that we have to see that we want to generate enough energy, electricity, to make life comfortable. At the same time, make sure that it must not impinge on our safety and our health.
Well,
so the fossil fuel generates a lot of energy, but the fossil fuel has two bad parts of it. Number one, it has become
greenhouse gas.
You have greenhouse gas, you have pollution, you have associated sicknesses, the illnesses that come with it, and more than that, has become a kind of political weapon that is being used.
Yeah.
So, fortunately, right now, many people are shying away from using fossil fuel for energy. And my expectation is within 20-30 years, the desire and the need for fossil fuel will drop by over 90%.
By over 9 or 90?
90.
90, 90, not 9.
No, 90, 90.
90% of the that's
90%.
Gasoline and kerosene and coal and oil and all the things we fight over access to in order to have one power be stronger than another in the geopolitical world.
That is correct.
Is the question.
The most important energy that we have at our disposal is solar energy. It doesn't require mining. It doesn't require transportation. It doesn't require refining. It arrives where you want it by itself, and more importantly, it will be there as long as you want it, or more accurately, we will be here as long as solar energy exists.
We've had solar energy since our tenure on Earth. All the time, solar energy has been available to us to tap.
Yes.
Has it not?
And at the moment that we lose solar energy, humanity ceases to exist.
Well, we would have to knock out the sun in order for that to happen.
Yeah, that's why I said that at the moment that the solar energy dies, the question becomes irrelevant because we no longer exist.
That's quite all right. I do not think there's any projections that the way the universe is set up, we come to understand the universe in real terms now, material terms, and intellectually understanding how it came to be, what is the course of the whole tenure of our planet.
Trying to understand it, but I don't think there is any definite 100% proof for that yet.
For what?
So that
for what?
I defer that to experts in cosmology.
No, I'm asking you, please.
Which I am not knowledgeable, but the fact is the theory that where it came from, how it came about, is changing. More important, I'm interested in energy and humanity on Earth. It is true that we try to send signals to the space, outer space, and try to gather information where people are there, whether universe is expanding or contracting. And very glutly, we are very glad that we have that capability, but we are not aware of the strife of our neighbors or the poor people who don't have the food to eat.
Well, that would be very interesting. Do you think the course of the human society, I do not think that it was one glorious picnic, the course of the human existence. My impression of it, when people were wandering around in the distant past, I think it was a very, very difficult situation that they found themselves, finding enough carrion that they could eat or food that they could happen to come upon as they were wandering and gathering. I don't think it was a very, what we would call a satisfactory lifestyle that has been the course of humanity up through history.
Yes, but the fact is, today, our capabilities has expanded. So the ratio of the people are using that uppermost of that capability to the people who are deprived of any of that is at an all-time high.
It has been, it's always been
not as much, because at that time there was not that huge of difference.
Oh, true.
They have that huge of difference.
That's right. You're right. Yeah.
The upper capability is far, far greater than what those deprived of those can get. And that becomes a source of strife, and that is what we have to address.
Yes, indeed. And I think that's been,
If we want a peace, we have to make sure that those level anywhere in the world that are suffering will have a way out and will be helped. That is the only way that we can have peace.
Do you think it has been improving the capability of providing what would be called, let's put it in quotes, a have-like way of existence for a human being? The percentage of the people that are able to be what would be considered a have in modern terms has been increasing over time, and that that is something. And is it possible ever to where we could have a world where everybody could be a have in the sense of having control over their own life and not be subject to being a serf on a feudal estate, which is the remnants of what the history has been, with people in charge in the castle and the peasants in the field wallowing around in the mud of poverty?
Yeah, but the fact is right now, the upper capability is far greater than the lower strife. So that distance has gone multiple times larger.
You think it's more marked, yeah?
It is worse. I think it is worse. And that the fact is that those who are denied or are
the peasants of the world over history, which is the bulk of the population.
See, remember, in the previous history, first of all, it wasn't that much science, advancement of science, that wasn't so many people. People were more spread out. And the fundamental idea of feeding and living, most of them had that capability. And it was not that great a distance between the lowest and the highest. Today, that capability is quite large. So we have to go through that route, and we have to look at it not as me or you or within here, but as us through the earth.
That would be, our spiritual leaders have told us to take care of the least among us all along, but it's been roundly ignored by the political class of readership throughout all of human history.
First of all, that is the fundamental of religion.
All right.
For people who believe in Christ, that is the fundamental message of Christ. If you deny that right, you cannot consider yourself as part of Christ's followers, no matter how much you claim. But the fact is, your deed speaks far greater than what you claim. A visitor from outer space looks at Earth as a planet, as one piece planet. Those who want to divide us look at Earth as walled groups of areas where the borders separate us.
Yes.
We have to look at borders at what is bring us together and not as what is separating us.
Well, we're easier to get together with the modern technology. We can be over the ocean. It took months and years to get across an ocean, but now we can fly overnight.
And we have to make sure to bring peace. We have to make sure that we can spread that knowledge for the peace and try to bring the level of the people up.
Well, then that would be
Remember, why do we have so much disconcerting efforts around the world?
Yes.
Youth
is loose in the world.
You have one of the youngest area in the history right now.
Yeah.
The youth in most of Middle East, Africa, Far East, from disadvantaged group that wears Nike, wears Levi jean, Guess shirt, and is listening to MP3 player, has already traveled more than half a distance to meet you. You have to go the other half a distance to meet that youth.
Well, go ahead.
And if you do that effort, then we can connect. And once we connect, we can resolve the problems. But if you want to stay isolated, there is no way that we can address the problems that exist and solve the problems that are coming up.
Is it any point at all in trying to talk about, we talk about haves and have-nots in the human condition? There are haves and there are have-nots. And I don't know how that can be measured or how it can be, but Daedalus was said that the history viewed in a certain way, it's a history it's a system, it's a nightmare of injustice from which we're attempting to awaken. That
is correct. That is correct. And the part of it is that these advanced scientific capabilities have fallen into the hand of the people where they don't have the ethics and morality of how to use them. And that is creating more lethal environment and more dangerous part. And that is what we have to address it, because morally and humanly, that is not possible to follow. 1% of the world control more than
90%.
More than combined wealth of 70% of people on Earth.
I would have thought it might have been high. Yes, that's it. And then we're talking now about atomic energy as something new. Relatively just yesterday, it was discovered in the human experience, and it has great significance, has great destructive capability, we know, in the weapons that have been developed as a way for one group to assume geopolitical ability to conquer another and be assumed they're more powerful than the other, and the fight over who's got the biggest ability to be influential in the world. And it's now becoming, and I mentioned to you before or asked, that those weapons have finally, with thermonuclear, becomes species lethal, it's combined with certain germ warfare things that also have been newly developed that are destructive or capable of being destructive in a way that was never possible. We could never have wiped out the human species any time in the past, but apparently that's at our hands now. And do you think
that's exactly that is what I was referring to, that we have access to technology, but we don't have the ethics and morality of how to use them.
Is there anything that's perhaps inherent in the technology or the time in which we come, which makes possible a now, or much less a near-term future, which has never been possible, to have universal justice for all of the citizens of the world to live their full biography, that never had the capability, the energy to provide for the citizens of the world that we have, which is the counterpart to the fact that we can now wipe them all out in a kind of way that brings it to a time of transformation on a large scale that the current situation we find ourselves in. These geologists are telling us now we leave the Holocene, the era that we've been geologically associated with, much less the Pleistocene, and they're calling it the Anthropocene now. That's coming out. It's likely to become part of the literature as we talk ahead. And is there a positive side to the human condition now, despite all the difficulties and the tremendous destructive capability? There's an equally significant living possibility for everybody that has never been available to us if we would but find that to be the case and the means by which it could be made real in the real world. Is there anything along those lines that might be worth thinking about?
What is promising is for the youth movement that was never thought that it would move. We see actions that can propel us to a new era.
Let's hope.
And that is very important in here and in the United States and also in many other countries. The fact is that to bring peace is not a bottom-up proposition, but a top-down proposition. Those are at the top and the most powerful one. Must be willing to put a step forward toward the peace. And we have enough destructive power to destroy Earth several times over.
I don't think we could destroy Earth. We could destroy the Homo sapiens species, not Earth, I think.
Well, what we are talking about is life on Earth.
Oh, well, there would be life. There would be microbes and
so
things that
you can destroy those, but the fact is that what we need to do is to use that tremendous capability, turn it around and see how we can do to save those people rather than destroy them.
Not to save them, it's like if you're in the womb and you're gestating in the womb that we have been doing for 200,000 years of our existence as a species, we're about to leave the womb into a new order of events in universe, which would be transcendent to like leaving the womb of history, which Daedalus said history is a nightmare of injustice, which it has been, to one of general justice and liberation of the entire Homo sapiens species with an ecological order, is now at our technological capability that never has been, and we ought to politically recognize that we have capabilities that we don't allow ourselves to think because we're mired in the nostrums and the institutions of a historical condition which we're transcending.
I think that the important part is we see that we have to evolve from a war mentality to a peace mentality.
Yes, sir.
Find solution rather than problem. Ask questions to solve the problems and not try to find solution for problems that don't exist and create conflict for those.
Yes, indeed.
That is the important part, because right now the excuse is always to try to address questions that nobody has asked.
Yeah, well, they're asking it now. Maybe the youth and so forth, or the Times are asking it. There's something blowing in the wind. We had a fellow, Bobby Dillon, who said the times they are changing, and there was all kinds of breath of air through the world that is gone and so forth. And it may be that we're talking about atomic or thermonuclear energy, and the fact that we have this new capability of energy that is so obviously destructive may be able to be part of a formula by which we can bring far greater general affluence, if that's the right term, or haveness to the vast majority of the population that have been denied that historically, into one where everybody would be involved in their own living situation as a have, which never they have been able to be in this particular area into which we've been built. And atomic energy is an important part by which those kind of things could be realized.
Yeah, we can use that. The fact is that today, the most important part is awareness, and the internet and the access to the information around the world by all the people is one great step toward that awareness, to bring awareness to people. At the beginning, it created a bit of havoc because people who were at a distance and looking the lives of some who are living at the top compared to what they're doing. For example, it was showing that the worker in an Indian factory that makes 25 cents a day to sew clothes, on TV they saw that the clothes that they saw, they are showing on a runway in thousands of dollars. Making quarter, and justification they make quarter that, well, we are making them a favor by giving them a quarter.
Yes, I know.
Well, sense that is not moral or ethical.
Yeah.
Now that
well,
information is there, they no longer is information isolated or in the hand of the few.
No, the opportunity is amazing, and the atomic and the nuclear energy is involved, and we've talked about that in historical terms. Let's take another hour. We've got another hour we're going to take about the role of energy, and particularly nuclear energy, in the creation of a vastly expanded and more just world in a positive way to apply to the human society. So we'll do a second program, if that's okay with you, following this. But we have to say goodbye for this particular program, okay?
Sure, no problem.
Okay, hang in, and we'll come back. And you've been listening to, as you say, Behrad Nakhaii, a nuclear engineer who understands the importance of nuclear energy to the improvement of the human condition that we might talk about in a second program. Thank you for viewing, and we'll be coming back. And thanks again, Behrad. Stay tuned. We'll be connecting with you for a second part of this series, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.